On the last night of her life, Sister Michelle Lewis got permission to stay up late. Life at her home, Miami's Monastery of the Exaltation of the Most Holy Cross, moved to the hands of a clock. Waking, praying, eating and sleeping were all a daily routine. Anything outside that schedule needed to be approved by the monastery's leader, Father Abbot Gregory Went.
That Saturday night, March 24th, 2001, Sister Michelle had the abbot's okay to watch the World Figure Skating Championships, playing out 3 time zones away in Vancouver. Before the championships, the American Michelle Kwan was under scrutiny. A year ago, she was focused and flawless, but now the reigning champion was detached, and her form and fitness seemed to drop after taking a break from the sport that summer. Now the 20-year-old was no longer the favorite.
Maybe Sister Michelle wanted to see if Kwan was like her and could transcend life's hardships, silence her doubters, and find glory in winning her 4th world championship. Or maybe she just wanted to have something to talk about with teachers or parents on Monday morning when they dropped their kids off at Holy Cross Academy, the monastery's small K-12 school where she ran the office, kept the books, and taught calculus.
In those final hours of her life, Sister Michelle sat alone, embroidering, and watching as her namesake skater sliced her blades deep into the ice, freeing herself from the days before. Kwan let loose and went big. She hit a clean triple-triple jump and a late triple lutz, then glided off and looked on as the remaining skaters failed to cut down her scores.
By 10 o'clock, Michelle Kwan was a world champion again.
By 10 o'clock, Sister Michelle had turned off the TV and made her way to bed.
But the 39-year-old wouldn't get to tell any of those parents or teachers what she saw on the ice that night. She wouldn't even make it to Sunday Mass the next morning. Before then, Sister Michelle would encounter another blade, one that would stab her more than 90 times, in an act of rage and violence that would change the lives of everyone at Holy Cross, including me. I'm Paula Barros.
And I'm Melanie Bartley.
And this is Sacred Scandal.
Paula, remind me, how did you first learn about the murder?
It was Sunday. Carolina walked into my room, my little sister. Sister Michelle is dead. I was like, what? In March 2001, I was a senior in a class of about 25 kids at Holy Cross Academy, a private Byzantine Catholic school in the Miami suburbs. I ended up at Holy Cross Academy because my parents thought that sending me to a Catholic school was going to stop me from booty dancing to Two Live Crew, which was, I guess, what they thought I was learning at my public middle school. So I said, get in the car. And I took my little sister to Holy Cross on that Sunday just to see if it was true or not. And as soon as we got there was the police tape and the news people were outside. I hated that school. From kneeling on the floor to show that my uniform skirts were long enough, to the rules about having to pray every morning, and the creepy priests who walked the halls in their long black robes. I could not wait to graduate and leave that whole experience behind me forever. But like everyone who was a part of Holy Cross back then, the trauma from Sister Michelle's horrendous murder and everything that came after meant that it stayed with us long after graduation.
And how did I get involved in all of this?
This is my friend Melanie.
Hi there.
I met your sister at a gas station. I'm going to call her Mel, and she'll be telling the story with me because even though she didn't go to school there, the story of Holy Cross has also become a big part of her life, too. And she brought me to your family's house. And then I think you were the one that immediately latched onto this story. Like, you needed to get to the bottom of it, I think.
I'm crazy.
You were crazy. You're out of your mind. When we met about 15 years ago, Mel was a student.
Well, I was studying film at the University of Miami, and Paula said she had a good idea for a true crime documentary.
And I told her about how Sister Michelle, a teacher from my school, was murdered on campus. And also about all the crazy stuff we started to find out about what was happening behind the scenes, and maybe even behind closed doors at Holy Cross. Because her death opened up so many secrets about the school, about the priest who ran it, and the quiet kids from Ukraine who we sat next to in class.
When Paula told me about everything, my jaw hit the floor. And so a little more than a decade ago, we started making our own movie to tell that story and look at the unanswered questions around this case.
It was thought to be, when the public defender's office first got the case, to be a very involved, very complicated case.
We talked to the police and lawyers from both sides who spent years investigating it and who traveled halfway across the world digging for the truth.
Can I go to the bathroom? Airplane, bathroom.
But we were young and total amateurs back then, doing interviews next to airports, and I mean, neither of us ever planned on becoming journalists. I've been everywhere from a semi-professional poker player to a clown for kids' birthday parties, and now I work as a stand-up comedian and a voice actress.
And I worked in TV and movies, and now run a small business and a small family.
As our lives started to change, some things about this case and Holy Cross have deeply stayed with us. But our documentary was put on the shelf.
That is until now.
That is right. We'll be telling this story using those original interviews. But all of these years later, they don't cover the full story. So we've gone back and spoken to many of those people again. And some of the things that they had to say this time surprised us.
That's because in the over 10 years since we started, and the 20 years since the murder, so much has changed.
To the parents and former students.
To the teachers and investigators.
And especially to us.
But before we get there, we need to take you back to 2001, to the moment it all started to unravel.
First, though, we have to take a break. When we come back, the search for Sister Michelle's murderer begins. Stay with us.
But before we get there, we need to take you back to 2001, to the moment it all started to unravel.
County Police and Fire, where's your emergency?
This is Holy Cross Academy, 12425, Southwest 72nd Street.
What's the emergency there?
The emergency is that one of the sisters didn't show up this morning for liturgy, and we sent someone over to look, and they said that there's like a nude body on the floor with blood.
March 25th, 2001. Like every other Sunday at Holy Cross Monastery, a pair of priests, a handful of student monks, and 2 nuns would gather in the morning and prepare to celebrate the liturgy, a traditional Byzantine Catholic mass performed in Greek. But this week, someone was missing.
Is it a male or a female body?
The female. It was the nun's comment, female.
Okay. And no one ever saw her move or anything like that?
No. The person that we sent over was one of the brothers to see what was wrong, and he found that and ran away right away. He was scared. Ran back here to tell me.
When that young monk, Patro Tarenta, opened the door to Sister Michelle Lewis's bedroom, he discovered a brutal scene. Her lifeless body lay on the floor in a dark red pool. clothes torn, almost naked. Blood seemed to speckle every surface. Her body was bruised and beaten, and with stab wounds all over. An autopsy would later tally them up to 92.
It was the school's founder and leader, Father Abbot Gregory Wendt, who called 911.
Wendt, W-E-N-D-T.
And it's Holy Cross?
Right.
Coming in at that particular time, all I knew was at a church or a school called Holy Cross. Actually, I was on the road. I was handling another call. One of the detectives that called me and said, "You've got one out off of Sunset Drive, which is West Miami-Dade County."
This is Art Nanny, a retired homicide detective with the Miami-Dade Police Department and lead investigator of this murder. As Detective Nanny pulled up to the school around 11 a.m., one of the first things he started to realize was the huge scale of the search ahead of his team.
This was a massive complex. There was a school, a church, a convent, and then it was surrounded by a lot of nurseries on different sides, and then some residences on the backside. We knew that we were going to need more than just one crime scene unit, that it was going to take several to cover this whole schoolyard. Matter of fact, the whole campus, I think we locked down well over 24 hours because there was an extensive scene to cover, not only because of the convent, but other places on the campus.
The school itself rose from suburban Sunset Drive like a Renaissance castle, complete with crosses on every spire. And the rest of the schoolyard spread out across a lot the size of at least 6 football fields.
Far from the school's front doors, on the southeast edge of the property, was the murder scene, the convent, which butted against the neighboring plant nursery. A few hundred yards away from the nun's house on the northwest side of campus, there was a small cluster of buildings, including the monastery, a house, and an office.
As Detective Nanny and his team searched the grounds, they soon found something strange connecting these two distant areas of campus.
We had these weird footprints that sort of went from the convent down some hallways to the school office, and then they kind of tapered off out towards the church and then disappeared. And these footprints, when I say footprints, they were not shoe prints, they were like bare feet. I don't want to say they're flat-footed, but they had a high arch. So it was just weird in shape. And the other thing, too, that there was like no toes. So we're not sure what they're wearing. But it was just weird in itself.
And that trail of toeless footprints would lead Detective Nanny to a second scene.
So when we, looked at the office, we had glass broken on the window to get in. And Sister Michelle's desk was, I don't want to say ransacked, but there was items that were askew on the desk, which now kind of maybe tied back to a reason why Sister Michelle was killed. But what was taken, if anything was taken, no one knows. It just didn't make sense. Why is the nun killed in the convent, which could be a few hundred yards from where the office is at? And then we got these weird footprints. Did two things occur that night? The initial thought was that because there was nurseries surrounding the church, that maybe we had a farm worker that could have been the killer. So we wanted to at least identify all the employees that worked at these nurseries. And you got to remember, too, in homicide, we kind of work from the inside out. So the priest, the monks, there was another elderly nun. Everyone, when you get there, is a suspect.
Coming up after the break, a speck of evidence takes detectives straight to the killer's door. Stay with us. Welcome back to Sacred Scandal. I'm Paula Barros.
And I'm Melanie Bartley.
When the police arrived at Holy Cross Academy on the day that Sister Michelle was found dead, one of the first things that they learned was that, despite appearances, the school and the group who ran it were not a part of the Roman Catholic Church. They were Byzantine, or they also call them Greek Catholics, which is a faith with some different beliefs and structures than their cousins in Rome, but who still shared the Pope at the top of their hierarchy.
Detective Nanny also started to discover more about the circumstances of the people living on the grounds.
So they lay out the scenario of Sister Michelle is she's not really an ordained nun. She's training to become a full-fledged nun. So, how is she not ordained if they're calling her a nun? But again, they told us about the different monks that were living there. And there was, I think, 5 monks in training as they go to school, that they were handpicked from the Ukraine, brought them over here to train, and they would eventually return and teach, and all their education was being paid for.
To get all of this information, Detective Nanny needed to speak with my high school's headmaster, Father Abbott Went. His first sight of the priest in his long black robe and high mitre hat made as much of an impression on the veteran officer as it did on a teenage me.
I do remember, I'm not sure if it was the school office or the church office, but there was this one big ass picture on the wall, and I think it was Father Abbott. I think he was the head priest. He looked like a pope, dressed up, and I'm looking at it. And you got to remember, my background is I'm a Catholic. We're taught from grade school to have this respect for priests, nuns, and things of that nature. So when we walked in there, we were also in a little bit of awe because this painting on the wall now became real as this guy came walking out of the door. He was a tall guy, and he had to be over 6 foot. You go from the picture to now the real person walks out, and it's like, damn, this, I was like taken back because of his presence.
You might expect the headmaster of a school to be cooperative and offer up as much help as possible to catch a killer on their campus. But when the detective and the abbot began speaking, the conversation started to take a strange turn.
Okay. They came out and they're sitting there talking, and we're trying to get information from them. And it's not like they were stonewalling us, but they were giving us nothing but basics. There's one thing that he said that kind of took us by surprise. This was his church. And not that he told us to tread lightly, but I kind of read it as, don't make a move on my turf without letting me know what was going to happen first.
As Detective Art Nanny and his investigators spoke with the priests and teenage monks of Holy Cross Academy, he charged a smaller group with gathering evidence at the scene of the murder.
Well, here's the thing about the crime scene. We only have one shot at the scene, so not a lot of people go into the scene. And John King, who is probably one of the finest homicide detectives out there that day, I assigned him that particular lead.
Yeah, my name is John King. I was a homicide detective with the Miami-Dade Police Department, and I was part of the team that was assigned this investigation.
Kind of walk me through the building where the crime scene was.
Had like a little kitchen. There was 2 bedrooms. The other bedroom was actually occupied by an older nun that lived there as well.
Did you notice anything out of the ordinary or anything strange?
The scene really, it was a mess in there. There was a lot of blood. My observations of the scene itself, as I recall, seems like she was pretty neat. Clothing was hung up. She, however, was nude on the floor with numerous stab wounds and bruises, and deceased. The only thing she had on was like a rolled up T-shirt that was pulled up. Pretty much it.
And so what is a typical process for analyzing or investigating a homicide in general?
Well, if you have a scene like that, then you have to really take your time. I don't even know how long it took before we moved the body, because everything has to be documented. Everything is documented in place. Before you actually touch anything on a crime scene, you actually photograph it first, just so that you know exactly how it looked when you got there.
I want to see, can you go back to the other photos of the room?
Okay, let me do that. Look at these. There's handprints everywhere. How can
Like bloody handprints?
full screen this?
It's just like a spatter
This.
over that trash can.
It looks like Halloween blood.
I was going to say, it looks like a horror movie.
It doesn't look real.
Like from the 80s. You know what I mean? Like
how does somebody
like
bleed
the
like that?
fake blood?
I'm gonna cry, baby. This is really bad. Yeah.
It's so much blood.
It's so bad. As Detective King and the others in the room took photographs of Sister Michelle's body, one of them noticed something small that appeared out of place.
I remember looking at it. I'm not sure which leg it was on, but there was a blood stain that really didn't look like it belonged there. I mean, it looked different than the rest of the smearing on her body. It definitely looked different than the rest of the blood. I mean, it was probably because it was dripping down from as opposed to being smeared, so it was a dark spot.
What would that tell you?
Quite often when a person has a knife, unless it has a hilt on it, which would prevent the hand sliding down off the handle, quite often a person stabbing someone will actually cut themselves and thereby cause a bleeding.
So this would basically tell you that the suspect would have hurt hands.
Well, yeah.
As the search went on, night brought darkness back over the grounds of Holy Cross Academy. But aside from the footprints and the drop of blood suggesting the killer had been injured, there wasn't much to follow in any direction.
With both the murder and the break-in at the office, investigators started to check on other buildings on campus, including the monastery and the house where the teenage monastic candidates lived. Now, 8 or 9 hours in, a new clue was about to turn their search for a suspect into unexpected territory.
So we didn't really focus in on the inner circle just yet, but we had to document everyone that was there. It wasn't until later, and I would say it was in the evening now, when people over at the house saw some blood on a doorknob.
When the approaching officers saw the doorknob, they had already been informed about the suspicious drop of blood on Sister Michelle.
After knocking on that door, a small, thin monk with dark hair opened up and greeted them. His voice was soft, with the tinge of an Eastern European accent. The monk's eyes were tired, and there were marks and scratches around his bearded face. As police started asking questions about Sister Michelle, he slowly slid a pair of bandaged hands into his pockets. Sacred Scandal is a production of Exile Content Studio in partnership with iHeartRadio's My Cultura podcast network. Sacred Scandal was created and produced by Melanie Bartley and me, Paula Barros. Our senior producer is Dennis Funk of Written in Air. The executive producers are Rose Reed and Nando Villa. Our production assistant is Imani Leonard. Story editing by Rachel Ward. The show is fact-checked by Kimberly Winston. Original music was composed by Patrick Hart. Audio editing by Gilbert Quiñones, with final audio mixing from Dixo. And special thanks on this episode to Ariel Stevenson and Corey Chakowski.